Oh, well, hello. What a pleasant surprise. I'm so happy you decided to stop by. Welcome back. It's me, Jordan, from the channel Jordan Gets a Hobby, in which I revisit some of the old hobbies from my youth, namely the 4th grade. Mine was polymer clay. Haven't done it in years, but last week I decided to make a bear that is doing ballet. If I must say so myself, turned out pretty good for someone who hasn't created anything since she was 14. So we're gonna try our hand at something different today. It's still gonna be pretty simple and pretty basic because that's the stage I'm at right now. Eventually, I hope to be able to create my own line of figurines, just like I used to have when I was but a wee little girl. I'm not there yet, so today I'm gonna try my hand at some sushi instead. Let's see how it goes. As you can see, we are not going for photorealistic sushi here. This is only my second project and I do not have the skills yet to put my work side by side with a real sushi roll and play the is this one food game. But here's my color palette for this project, and I'm gonna start by making a lot of little ropes from the white clay. So I'm rolling off some balls, making up some ropes, and that's gonna represent my rice. So this idea, it's pretty similar to when I used to make clay jewelry as a kid. And I would create a log out of different colored ropes and then slice it almost like those, those slice and bake cookies. Pretty similar, just to make all of the beads for, say, like a necklace. So I'm going to make a pretty basic roll here, do a lot of white ropes for the rice, some light green for the avocado, and then mixing up some pink to represent some salmon. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the process. I have no business giving a step-by-step tutorial. And I was actually in the middle of a story about my journey of losing and refinding my creativity. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and watch my previous video to get the first part of that story. If I've learned enough about YouTube, I'll put a link to it somewhere on the screen right about here. But basically, we got to this season of me being a full-time therapist and working in an intensive outpatient program. So like I said before, I was not really making a lot of time to do the hobbies I was used to. Before I had entered into grad school, I was actually in a pretty good season of writing a lot. I had a podcast for a while with my friend Jade called Truth and Dare, where we would read our old middle school diary entries and then dare each other to do some creative challenges. So at that time, I was writing a lot of poetry, doing some songwriting, doing some open mics because that was kind of part of that process of doing the podcast together. But after grad school and starting at the job, all of that had gone away. So my work days prior to March 2020 were full of traveling around the city, visiting clients at their schools and their homes. Sometimes they would make me really good food, and then I would wrap up my day doing groups at the clinic and then waiting around sometimes for hours after group for all of the kids to get picked up by their VEO cabs. I was busy doing treatment plans and child and family team meetings, sometimes attending court for some kids, doing crisis management. It just took a lot of brain power for someone who identifies as a pretty extreme introvert. Was not spending a lot of time at that point, writing in my journal and writing poetry. Then I was doing all of this stuff when I was pregnant and had my daughter in December of 2019. So for all my moms out there, newborn season, you're not about to be picking up any new hobbies because you've got no spare time to think of. Your objective at that point is pretty much keeping the baby healthy and trying your best to function with extreme sleep deprivation. If I had any hobbies at that point, it was probably just trying to avoid clogged milk ducts, honestly. Now, if you did your math right, you might realize that I would have been on track to return to work from maternity leave in March of 2020. I think it was about 3 or 4 days before I was scheduled to have my first day back at work that my job ended up sending everyone home to work remotely. So I stayed at the house with my daughter and I became an online therapist working full-time hours. Now, if you ask me how I managed to do that, the answer is I do not know. I think I blocked a lot of that time period out because I was just in survival mode, trying to care for an infant while also caring for people's emotions over the internet. I do not recommend that at all. But during that season, my creativity looked more like me nursing my daughter out of frame while a 12-year-old girl gave me a tour of her bedroom over Zoom. I know, though, that I was not doing well because at that time I would cry a lot to my supervisor during our weekly supervision hour, and I would ask him a lot of existential questions. But I went through that for about 8 months, working full-time at home with a baby before I cracked and finally got HR to let me drop down to part-time. That definitely gave me more of a mental reprieve, but some of my existential questions did not really go away. That's probably a whole other video on why I ultimately let my therapy license expire and I quit my job, which was just about a year ago. I was offered a different job at the school that I work at now, and I do still use a lot of similar skills, but it doesn't require me to keep up a state license. And I'm the only position of this nature in this whole network of schools. So nobody can really come at me and tell me, oh, well, this is how so-and-so used to do this, because there's never been a so-and-so. So one day, whenever I leave, some poor sap is gonna have to hear, oh, well, when Jordan was here, she did it like this, and that will be my legacy. So in this season, creativity has been helping to build a program from the ground up that serves students, teachers, and their families. I've been creating my own lessons on things like friendship and responsibility. So now I've basically got this whole curriculum that is set up around the school's pillars of character, which, pillars of character, because every school has those. I don't know if you remember yours, but they're always things like citizenship, trustworthiness, fairness, basically the same buzzwords you always see on people's political campaign posters in people's yards. But that brings us to today. My job now is not as stressful. I'm not fielding emergency calls at 9 p.m. from someone who needs to be hospitalized. And my daughter is a little bit more independent, though for now I am only doing these projects when she's asleep, so she doesn't take all of my clay for herself and cook it in her play kitchen. But I have a little more time and a lot more energy right now to devote to creative pursuits. Little things like making tiny shrimp out of clay that just helped me to connect to parts of myself that felt dormant for a really long time. So that's why I am here now. The name Jordan Gets a Hobby, it is a little meta because I am revisiting things that I used to do as a kid, but YouTube itself is also becoming my new hobby because I'm trying to keep up with the schedule of making a new video just about every week. That gives me some incentive or motivation to keep building my skills because I'm documenting my progress as I go. I know I personally like to see people's progress for things like their fitness journey. I'm not just interested in seeing the before and the after. I get value from seeing the beginning stages of someone's journey too. Maybe the different obstacles that they face at different points in time and watching them transform slowly. Or for my husband, Warren, I know he started teaching himself the bass guitar at the beginning of the shutdown, and he would just practice a little bit, maybe 15 minutes every day. And now he's good enough to play at church, and he could just play random stuff on the piano now because he actually understands music theory. So that was really encouraging for me to see, seeing him go from knowing how to play absolutely nothing to being able to now just pick up new things on the spot. Anyway, I guess we're finally at the spot where I have run out of other things to say, so I could go back to talking about what I'm actually doing on screen. So I have now cut up all my sushi. I've put it on this nice plate. It didn't come out exactly as I was hoping for it to. I think my sushi ended up a little bit blurry because the knife that I used to cut up the pieces was not sharp enough. So now I know in the future, use an X-Acto knife when I'm cutting my clay sushi. The random end bits I'm just swirling together because maybe I'll make some nice beads out of it sometime. But then I decided to rough up the texture a little bit with a fork to maybe make it look a little bit more like it's actual grains of rice in there. Give it a little bit of texture. So that's it. I've got my sushi, my fortune cookies, my shrimp, And now the last step is for it to go into the oven. So again, it is at 275 to avoid any weird fumes coming out from the oven being too hot. Going in for 15 minutes, and then I just had to let it cool basically overnight because the oven is supposed to come back to a regular temperature before you take your clay stuff out. And then I let my daughter take a look at it the next morning. She had a little bit of difficulty, identifying all my pieces of food, but ultimately she did appreciate that I'm going to be letting her use it to feed her dolls. And that's all I got for today. So thank you for sticking with me and listening to my very long-winded story. If you appreciated it, please hit the thumbs up button on this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you would like to hear more about the creative process and just follow along with me. This is basically like another fitness journey, except for me it's with clay and other, assorted sculpting materials. So I'll see you on the next one. Bye guys.